The gavel struck once. A sharp, echoing crack rolled through the high-ceilinged courtroom, cutting through the tense hum of whispered conversations. Every head turned toward the bench, and the woman seated there. Judge Naomi Carter didn't flinch. She never did. At 56, she'd heard every insult, every backhanded comment, every veiled threat a black woman in her position could expect. But today was different. The weight in the air wasn't just from the case before her. It was from what she knew, deep in her bones, was about to happen. "Order," she said, her voice steady but firm, each syllable carrying an authority that couldn't be faked. The murmurs died instantly. Outside, the early morning rain tapped against the tall windows, streaking them in gray ribbons. The scent of damp coats and old wood filled the room. Behind her, the state seal gleamed in polished brass. In front of her, rows of people shifted in their seats. Journalists with notepads ready, attorneys smoothing their suits, and citizens who had come to witness what promised to be another routine day in the county courthouse. But Naomi knew it would be anything but routine. At the prosecution's table sat District Attorney Victor Harlan, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. His pinstripe suit was as sharp as his ambition. Across from him, the defense attorney, a wiry, nervous man named Rojas, tapped his pen against a stack of disorganized papers. Between them, the defendant, a young mechanic named Malik Rivers, sat in his wrinkled button-down, his jaw tight, eyes forward. Malik was here on charges Naomi had already started doubting the moment she'd read the police report. The arrest had been too quick, the evidence too neat, the story too perfect. She'd been on the bench long enough to know that in her city, perfect often meant manufactured. But what most people in that courtroom didn't know, not yet, was that this case was a thread. And if she pulled it hard enough, it would unravel something much bigger, something dangerous. As the court clerk read out the formal charges, Naomi's gaze swept across the gallery. She saw the usual: curious citizens, family members, activists scribbling in worn notebooks. But in the far left row, third seat from the back, a man sat with his arms crossed, watching her with a faint, knowing smirk. She recognized him instantly. Councilman Daniel Price. Her stomach tightened. He had no official role in this case. Yet here he was, front and center, like he was waiting for a show. Naomi shifted in her seat, keeping her expression neutral. She'd had her run-ins with Price before. The man was charming in public, ruthless behind closed doors. He had connections to the police union, the DA's office, and, if rumors were true, some of the dirtiest backroom deals in the county. What in the world was he doing here? The court clerk's voice faded into the background for Naomi as her mind started to race. She thought about the email she'd received late last night from an anonymous address. No greeting, no signature, just a single PDF attachment labeled, "For your eyes only." She'd opened it on her kitchen table, under the soft hum of her refrigerator, long after her husband had gone to bed. What she saw had kept her awake until dawn. It was a scan ledger. Dates, names, and dollar amounts. And right there, buried halfway down the page, was a payment that made her blood run cold. $25,000. Price, Daniel Harlan. Victor. Case 1148. Case 1148 was Malik Rivers' case. Naomi's eyes had lingered on that line for a long time. She'd known corruption existed in the city. Every judge did. But seeing it tied to the man who had just stepped into her courtroom, and to the district attorney trying to put away an innocent mechanic, that was something else entirely. She looked at Malik now. His hands were clenched together so tightly his knuckles were white. His mother sat behind him, gripping a small Bible. Her lips moved silently, either in prayer or in fear. Naomi felt a familiar burn rise in her chest, the same one she'd felt years ago as a public defender, when she'd watched young black men get railroaded by a system designed to keep them in check, not give them justice. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Rivers, you stand accused of grand theft auto, possession of stolen property, and resisting arrest. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Malik said, his voice low but steady. Harlan's smirk barely moved. "We'll prove otherwise, Your Honor." Naomi held his gaze for a fraction of a second too long. She could almost see the arrogance dripping from him, the certainty that this case was already in the bag. But he didn't know what she knew, and he didn't know what she was willing to do. The first witness was called, Officer Jared Mills, the arresting officer. He strutted to the stand in his neatly pressed uniform, the faint creak of leather accompanying each step. Naomi watched his body language. Confident. Too confident. Officer Mills, Harlan began. Tell the court what happened on the night of July 14th. Mills launched into his testimony, painting a picture of Malik as a suspicious figure lurking near a car lot after hours, of how he fit the description from a recent theft, and how the stolen car was miraculously found with Malik's fingerprints on the steering wheel. Naomi took notes quietly, her pen gliding across the yellow legal pad. But inside, her mind was picking apart every inconsistency. The timeline was off. The chain of custody on the evidence wasn't airtight, and she'd already seen something in that anonymous ledger that made Officer Mills' name familiar. She flipped to a fresh page in her pad and wrote 2 words in the corner, circling them twice. Follow the money. As Mills continued, Naomi glanced back toward Price. His smirk had grown. He leaned back, stretching one arm along the back of the bench like he was enjoying himself. She knew that look. He wasn't here for Malik. He was here for her. The thought sent a chill through her. Whatever game was being played, she was now part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. And as the morning rain outside turned into a downpour, Naomi Carter realized that this case wasn't just going to test the law. It was going to test her courage. She tapped her gavel once. Continue. But in her heart, she knew the real trial hadn't even begun yet. Naomi Carter had been in courtrooms for over 30 years, but she'd never forgotten her first. Back then, she wasn't Your Honor. She was a 25-year-old public defender fresh out of Howard Law, carrying a beat-up leather briefcase and a stack of files so thick they left dents in her shoulder. She remembered the smell of that first courtroom, old varnish, stale coffee, and anxiety. Her first client had been a teenager named Curtis, charged with theft. The evidence against him was flimsy, but it didn't matter. The judge barely looked at him before ruling in favor of the prosecution. Curtis had gone to juvenile detention. That day, Naomi had walked out of the courthouse and sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, vowing she would never get used to the system swallowing people whole. That promise had carried her through decades of grueling cases, political battles, and the long, lonely climb to the bench. Now, as she sat behind the elevated mahogany desk in courtroom 4B, watching Victor Harlan weave a neat little story about Malik Rivers, that old promise burned in her chest again. The morning session ended for recess. Naomi banged the gavel and stood, the robe heavy on her shoulders. As she stepped into her chambers, the buzz of conversation from the courtroom faded behind the thick oak door. Her clerk Denise followed her in. Your Honor, you have a call on line 2, she said, handing her the phone receiver. No name given, just said it was urgent. Naomi hesitated. Anonymous calls were rarely good news. She picked up. Judge Carter speaking. A male voice, low and strained, came through the line. You don't know me, Judge, but I know you've got something in your hands that could blow this whole thing wide open. Naomi's grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? You think Malik Rivers is the only one they've done this to? Check Officer Mills' testimony against the last 3 grand theft cases he's worked. Same pattern. Same evidence. She glanced toward her desk drawer, where she'd stashed the printed ledger from last night. Why are you telling me this? Because people who get too close to Price and Harlan, they don't just lose cases. They lose everything. Be careful. The line went dead. Naomi set the phone down slowly, her pulse pounding in her ears. By the time she returned to the bench, she had her game face back on. The rest of the testimony went as expected. Neat, clean, rehearsed. Malik's defense attorney tried to poke holes in the story, but every objection was met with smug counterpoints from Harlan. When court adjourned for the day, Naomi descended the bench steps. She was halfway to the door when she heard the voice. Judge Carter. She turned. Councilman Price stood there, close enough to be imposing but far enough to feign politeness. "Councilman," she said flatly. "Interesting case you've got," he said, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "Small town mechanic. Big time trouble. Justice doesn't care about the size of the town," she replied. He chuckled. Of course. I just hope you don't complicate things. Sometimes it's better to let the machine run." Her eyes narrowed. "And sometimes the machine is broken." His smile froze for a fraction of a second before returning, colder this time. "Be careful, Naomi. People talk. And when they talk, they tend to remember things you'd rather they didn't." It was a threat, wrapped in charm. She'd seen the type before. Men who thought power was a shield against accountability. But this time, the threat felt sharper, closer. "I appreciate your concern," she said, stepping past him. "But I've been in this job long enough to know when someone's trying to steer the outcome. And I don't take kindly to that." She didn't look back as she walked away, but she could feel his gaze on her like a weight. That evening, Naomi sat at her kitchen table again, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The ledger lay open in front of her, alongside her laptop. She'd already pulled up court records for the last 3 cases involving Officer Mills. The anonymous caller had been right. 3 defendants, all young black men, all accused of car theft, all arrested by Mills. In each case, the evidence was found under suspiciously convenient circumstances. Fingerprints in odd places, eyewitnesses who later recanted, and cars recovered too quickly to be believable. In 2 of those cases, the defendants had taken plea deals under pressure from the DA's office. The third had disappeared from the public record entirely after an abrupt case dismissal. Naomi leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She knew she was looking at a pattern, one that could blow open more than just Malik's trial. But the bigger the pattern, the bigger the danger. She poured herself a glass of water, the clink of ice against the glass breaking the stillness. She thought about the councilman's smirk, about the DA's confident swagger, about Malik's mother clutching that Bible like it was the last solid thing in her world. No matter the risk, she couldn't walk away. The next morning in court, the first confrontation came earlier than expected. During cross-examination, Malik's defense attorney asked Officer Mills a question Naomi herself had been itching to hear answered. "Officer, can you explain why the timestamp on the surveillance footage shows the stolen car being driven into the lot before my client was even in the area?" Harlan shot to his feet. "Objection. Relevance. Overruled," Naomi said sharply. Mills' jaw tightened. "Must be a glitch in the system. A glitch that conveniently works in your favor?" the defense attorney pressed. "Watch yourself, counselor," Harlan interjected. Naomi's gavel came down. "Enough. Officer Mills, you will answer the question." He shifted in his seat. I don't know. Maybe the timestamp's wrong." The defense attorney's eyes lit up. "So you admit the evidence timeline could be unreliable?" Harlan's glare could have cut glass. "Your Honor, this is turning into a fishing expedition. Then I suggest you let the witness answer clearly so we can all see what's in the net," Naomi said, her tone even but laced with steel. In that moment, Naomi caught something, a flicker of panic in Mills' eyes. It was small, but it was there, and it told her she just kicked the first pebble loose from a very big mountain. By the time the noon recess was called, Naomi could feel the shift in the room. It wasn't just a courtroom anymore. It was a pressure chamber. The defense attorney was emboldened. Malik sat a little straighter, and the reporters' pens scratched across their notepads with fresh energy. Victor Harlan's jaw was tight when he approached the bench during recess. His voice was low enough that the jury couldn't hear, but every word carried an edge. "Your Honor," he said, "I'm concerned about the direction your rulings are taking. This isn't an investigation into police procedures. It's a trial for grand theft auto." Naomi met his eyes evenly. "And part of my job is to ensure the evidence presented is credible. That includes procedures." Harlan's smile was razor thin. "You dig too deep, Judge, and you'll undermine public trust in law enforcement." She leaned forward just slightly, lowering her voice. "Or I might restore it." For a moment, neither moved. Then he stepped back, straightening his tie, and walked away without another word. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the buzz was louder than usual. The press was picking up on the tension. Naomi could see the microphones and cameras hovering near the door, reporters trading theories in hurried whispers. Denise, her clerk, met her near chambers. "Judge, there's a reporter from the Chronicle asking for a comment." Naomi shook her head. No statements during an active trial. Still, she couldn't ignore what this meant. The story was leaking, and once it hit the press, people like Harlan and Price wouldn't just be irritated, they'd be cornered. That afternoon's testimony was a chess match. The defense pressed Mills on every inconsistency, while Harlan worked overtime to redirect the jury's attention. Naomi kept a close eye on the jurors. She could read them the way some people read sheet music, the crossed arms, the subtle frowns, the sideways glances. They were no longer absorbing the prosecution's story as gospel. Doubt was setting in. During a recess, Naomi stepped into her chambers for a moment alone. She pulled the ledger from her desk drawer again. The page with the $25,000 payment to Harlan was almost burning a hole through her. She thought about slipping it to the defense, but that would cross an ethical line she couldn't risk. Not yet. She needed corroboration. That evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me. Tonight. 9 p.m. Old Train Depot. Alone." Naomi stared at it, weighing her options. It could be the same anonymous source who sent the ledger, or it could be a trap. By 9:15, she was parked at the far end of the abandoned depot lot, rain misting on her windshield. The smell of wet asphalt seeped through the cracked window. A man stepped from the shadows, tall, wearing a hooded sweatshirt. He stopped 10 feet from her car. "You got the ledger?" he asked. Naomi rolled the window halfway down. "Who are you?" "A friend. I used to work in evidence processing. I know how Mills plants fingerprints." Her breath caught. "Go on." He uses clean gloves and a dusting kit, lifts partials from old records, then transfers them to whatever he needs to find. Seen him do it twice. Naomi's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "And you're telling me this because? Because I'm tired of watching them ruin lives. Price owns Mills. And Harlan? He's just the delivery system." Before she could ask for proof, headlights flared at the far end of the lot. The man stepped back, eyes narrowing. "Gotta go," he muttered, disappearing into the darkness. A black SUV rolled past slowly, tinted windows hiding the driver. Naomi's instinct screamed at her to leave. She started the engine and drove out without looking back. The next morning, she arrived at the courthouse to find the temperature had dropped, not outside, but in the way people treated her. Officers in the hallway avoided her eyes. Court staff gave clipped greetings. Even Denise seemed tense, glancing toward the door as if expecting trouble. It didn't take long to find out why. On her desk sat a plain manila envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Young Public Defender Carter's client sentenced in controversial theft case." Below it was a photo of a younger Naomi, standing next to a sullen teenage boy, Curtis, her first client. The subtext was clear. "We can dig into your past too." She set the clipping down slowly. This was Price's style. Not a direct hit, but a reminder that he could make life very uncomfortable. Back in the courtroom, things were shifting fast. The defense called a surprise witness, Malik's co-worker, a man named Devont Harris. "I saw Malik that night," Devont said firmly. "We were fixing up an old Chevy at my uncle's shop until after midnight. He wasn't anywhere near that car lot." Harlan pounced. "And you expect this court to believe you just happened to remember this after weeks of investigation?" Devont didn't flinch. "I didn't remember. I realized. When I saw the footage on the news, I knew the timestamp was wrong. That's when I knew they were setting him up." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Naomi glanced at the jury. Several were leaning forward now, hungry for more. The DA's jaw worked as he shuffled papers, buying time. Naomi could see the frustration in his movements. The cracks were showing. By late afternoon, Naomi sensed the trial was slipping out of Harlan's control. But she also knew that made him more dangerous. Men like him didn't go down quietly. When the session ended, she was gathering her notes when Denise slipped in with a pale face. "Judge, someone's here to see you, says it's urgent." Naomi frowned. Who? Denise hesitated. Your husband. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't even told Marcus about the ledger, about the anonymous calls, about Price's visit. If he was here in the middle of a workday, something was wrong. Marcus sat in her chambers, hat in his hands, eyes dark with worry. Naomi, he said quietly, 2 men came to the house today. Said they were with the zoning commission. Asked a lot of questions about the property line, the taxes, and about you. She sat down slowly. What exactly did they say? They didn't say much, but the way they looked at me, it wasn't about zoning. Naomi exhaled through her nose. The message was loud and clear. They weren't just coming after her in court. They were reaching into her life. And now, the fight wasn't just about Malik Rivers. It was about survival. Naomi barely slept that night. She lay in bed, staring at the faint glow of the streetlights spilling through the blinds. Marcus breathing softly beside her. Every sound, the creak of the old house, the low rumble of a passing car, made her eyes snap open. She was thinking about the men who'd come to her home, about the black SUV at the train depot, about Price's smirk and Harlan's warning, and about the ledger. At 3:17 a.m., she got up quietly, padded to her home office, and opened the drawer where she kept it locked. Her fingers brushed the manila folder like it was radioactive. She thought of every possible outcome of bringing it into the light, the headlines, the political fallout, the retaliation. But she also thought about Malik's mother, whispering silent prayers in the back row. By dawn, her mind was made up. She wouldn't bury it. Court resumed at 9 o'clock sharp. The air felt heavy, like the space before a summer storm. Naomi noticed something as she scanned the room. Councilman Price wasn't in his usual seat. Instead, a different man sat there. Younger, broader, wearing a gray suit with no tie. He looked like someone who was used to being obeyed without question. She filed the detail away. The morning began with Harlan calling a forensic technician to the stand, a woman named Sarah Kemp, who was supposed to testify about the fingerprint match on the stolen car. Harlan led her through the standard process questions, letting the jury hear the neat little chain of custody. Naomi listened, pen poised, waiting for her moment. Then it came. Ms. Kemp, Harlan said smoothly, can you confirm that the fingerprint on the steering wheel was a 100% match for the defendant Malik Rivers? Yes, Kemp said. It matched with full certainty. Naomi glanced toward Malik. His jaw clenched, but his eyes stayed forward. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. Ms. Kemp, how many fingerprints did you find on that steering wheel? 4 partials and 1 full print, she said. And you're certain the full print belongs to my client? Yes. Even though the timestamp on the video suggests the car arrived before my client was anywhere near the lot? Kemp hesitated. I can't speak to the timestamp. Naomi leaned forward slightly. Ms. Kemp, she said, her voice calm but firm. How long have you been processing fingerprint evidence? 15 years, Your Honor. In those 15 years, have you ever encountered cases where fingerprints were transferred from one surface to another? The courtroom went still. Kemp shifted in her seat. Yes, it's rare, but it can happen. And how would that be detected? Naomi asked. She cleared her throat. If the print is too perfect, or the placement doesn't make sense with the person's supposed actions, it can be a sign. The defense attorney's voice was steady, but Naomi could hear the current of excitement under it. In this case, Ms. Kemp, was there anything unusual about the print placement? Kemp hesitated just long enough for the silence to speak volumes. It was very clean, almost like it was pressed there deliberately. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Harlan shot up. Objection. This is speculation. Overruled, Naomi said. She saw Harlan's jaw lock, but she didn't look away. The jury's eyes were wide now, absorbing every word. The ripple effect was immediate. At the morning break, Harlan stormed into Naomi's chambers without knocking. What the hell was that? You're letting the defense turn this trial into a circus. Naomi stood from behind her desk. I'm letting the truth come out. If the evidence is questionable, the jury has the right to hear it. His eyes narrowed. You think you're untouchable? Price won't protect you from this. You're not part of the team. Her stomach tightened at the slip. What team is that? Exactly. He realized what he said, straightened his jacket, and turned for the door. Careful, Judge. This city doesn't forgive troublemakers. The door slammed behind him. By lunch, Naomi knew the trial had shifted under everyone's feet. The jurors were no longer leaning toward conviction. They were leaning toward suspicion. Suspicion of the prosecution, the police, maybe even the system itself. But with that shift came danger. At 1:15, as she was walking back from a quick sandwich at the deli down the street, a car pulled up alongside her. The passenger window rolled down. It was the broad-shouldered man from the gallery that morning. "Judge Carter," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "You're making things messy." She didn't break stride. "I'm doing my job." He smiled faintly. "Jobs can change. Lives can change. Accidents happen." She stopped then, turned to face him fully. "Tell your boss if he wants me scared, he'll have to try harder." The smile faded. Message delivered. The car pulled away. Naomi stood there for a beat, rain beginning to mist against her cheeks, before heading back toward the courthouse. The turning point came that afternoon. The defense called their final witness, Malik himself. He stood at the witness stand, shoulders squared, and told his story. How he'd been working late at the shop. How he'd been stopped by Mills without cause. How the keys to the stolen car had been found in his jacket, a jacket he hadn't worn in weeks. "Why would Officer Mills frame you?" the defense attorney asked. Malik glanced at the jury, then back at his lawyer. "Because I wouldn't give him what he wanted. He came by the shop a month ago, asked me to make some repairs off the books for one of his friends. When I said no, he smiled and told me I'd regret it." The courtroom erupted. Naomi's gavel slammed down. "Order!" Harlan was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." "Sit down, Mr. Harlan," Naomi said sharply. She could feel it. The balance had shifted completely. The jury wasn't just doubting the prosecution now. They were angry. And that was when Naomi knew. If she didn't act soon, the people Malik was up against would burn the whole courthouse down to keep their secrets. That night, she sat at her kitchen table again, the ledger open in front of her. Marcus poured 2 cups of tea, set one beside her, and put a hand on her shoulder. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him. "If I don't, this city stays broken." Naomi Carter had made up her mind. She would not let this case fade into the background like so many before it. The morning after Malik's testimony, she arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. The streets were still damp from an overnight drizzle, and the smell of wet concrete followed her through the front doors. She wanted quiet time in her chambers before the trial day began. Time to think about her next move. Her first step, find allies who wouldn't fold under pressure. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she stopped on a name she hadn't used in years, Samuel Brooks, a retired federal prosecutor with a spotless record, and, more importantly, no loyalty to the local political machine. She hit call. "Naomi Carter." Samuel's deep, gravelly voice came through after the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd come looking for me. You've heard about the Rivers trial?" "I've heard more than that. I've heard you're poking the bear. Price and Harlan don't like to be poked." She exhaled slowly. "I have proof of a payoff, ledger entries, possible evidence tampering. But I can't hand it to the defense without risking a mistrial." "Then don't hand it to the defense," he said. "Hand it to me. I'm not bound by your bench. And I know how to make the right people nervous without tipping them off." Naomi hesitated. "If I do that, this stops being my fight." "No," Samuel said, his voice steady. "It becomes our fight." Back in the courtroom, the tension was thicker than ever. Naomi could feel eyes on her as she took her seat, not just from the gallery, but from the jury box. They were beginning to sense that this case was more than it appeared. The defense called a handwriting expert to examine the police report. Under oath, the expert testified that a key signature on the evidence log, supposedly Officer Mills, had been traced over, possibly forged. The prosecution objected, but Naomi allowed the testimony. And that's when she noticed it in the back row, The broad-shouldered man from earlier scribbled something on a notepad, then slipped out the side door. Her gut told her this wasn't about notes. During the lunch break, Naomi didn't go to her chambers. She walked the block to a small cafe, ordered a black coffee, and sat in the corner. 2 minutes later, Samuel Brooks walked in. "You look like a woman who's been in a knife fight," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Feels like one," she replied, handing him the folded ledger page. "This is the line that ties Price to Harlan. $25,000 for case 1148. He scanned it quickly, his brow furrowing. "You realize this isn't just bribery. If this is linked to a pattern of false convictions, we're talking racketeering." She nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." Samuel tucked the page into a slim folder. "I'll start pulling bank records, see if there's a trail." "But Naomi, I know," she cut in. "They'll come after me harder." That harder came faster than she expected. When she returned to the courthouse, a uniformed officer was waiting at her chamber's door. "Judge Carter, building security found this outside your office." He handed her a small box. No return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single plain card, the Queen of Spades, with a red slash drawn across her face. Marcus's words from the other night echoed in her mind. "They want you scared." She set the card down and looked the officer in the eye. "Tell security to increase the patrols around my chambers, and keep a record of who enters this hallway." That afternoon, the defense moved to subpoena Officer Mills' phone records, citing possible communication with Councilman Price. Harlan fought it with everything he had, calling it an outrageous fishing expedition. Naomi ruled in the defense's favor. The reaction was instant. A murmur in the gallery, the jury exchanging quick glances, and Harlan glaring at her like she just handed him a death sentence. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with controlled fury. "You are overstepping your bounds." Naomi kept her voice calm. "My bounds are the law, Mr. Harlan. I intend to stay well within them." As the day ended, Naomi noticed something in the jurors' faces. Not just doubt, but curiosity. They wanted to know what would happen next. That meant the prosecution was losing control of the narrative, and Price would not let that stand. She gathered her files and stepped into the hallway, only to find Samuel waiting for her. "Got something for you," he said, handing her a small envelope. Inside was a printed email chain between Mills and Price. Casual language, but one line stood out. "Don't worry about Rivers. Harlan's got it lined up. Just keep your end clean." Naomi stared at the paper. "This could blow the case wide open." Samuel nodded. "And it could paint a target on your back the size of City Hall." She slipped the email into her folder. "Then we'd better aim first." That night, she and Marcus sat at their kitchen table again. He listened silently as she explained Samuel's involvement. The ledger, the playing card, and the email. "You're building a case inside a case," Marcus said finally. "I'm building a truth," she corrected. He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then make sure you survive it." By the time Naomi turned out the lights, she knew exactly what part one of her plan was. Keep the trial on track, let the defense dig deeper, and use her rulings to force the truth into the open. Part two? She wasn't ready to say out loud yet. The next morning, she entered the courtroom to find it unusually quiet. The jury was already seated, the attorneys at their tables. The broad-shouldered man was back in the gallery, his eyes locked on her. As she sat down and banged the gavel, she felt it, the sense that the walls were closing in. But she also felt something else, the momentum building. And when she looked at Malik Rivers, sitting straighter than she'd ever seen him, she knew she wasn't the only one who felt it. The rain outside was relentless, hammering against the courthouse windows as if it wanted to be let in. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew. Naomi could feel the tension in the way the jurors shifted in their seats, in the way Harlan's pen tapped just a little too fast against his legal pad. It was day 9 of the trial, and the subpoenaed phone records for Officer Mills had arrived that morning. The defense attorney, Mr. Rojas, looked like a man carrying a live grenade. "Your Honor," he began, rising to his feet. "With the court's permission, I'd like to present newly admitted evidence." Harlan was on his feet before Rojas could take a breath. Objection. This is a stunt. Naomi banged the gavel once, overruled. Let's hear it. Rojas walked to the evidence cart, picked up a thick stack of printed call logs, and handed them to the bailiff, who passed them to the clerk. These are Officer Mills' phone records for the 2 weeks leading up to my client's arrest, Rojas said. In that time, there were 24 calls between Officer Mills and Councilman Daniel Price, including 3 on the very night of the alleged theft. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Naomi's gavel struck twice. Order in the court. Harlan's voice was icy. Councilman Price is not on trial here. No, Rojas cut in. But his involvement directly impacts the credibility of your star witness. He turned toward the jury. Ask yourselves why a city councilman would be in constant contact with the arresting officer in a case involving a young black mechanic, especially when that same officer has a history of miraculously finding evidence. Naomi watched the jury's eyes. They were locked on Rojas, some leaning forward, lips pressed tight. Rojas wasn't done. And if that's not enough, he said, reaching for another folder. We have Exhibit 47, an internal email between Officer Mills and Councilman Price, obtained through a whistleblower. The email was displayed on the projector. There it was, in black and white. Price. Need Rivers handled before Thursday. Harlan's ready. Just make sure the prints are there. Naomi felt the entire room freeze. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Harlan shot to his feet. Objection. This is hearsay. Unauthenticated. Rojas slammed the folder shut. The email was verified by the IT department from the police precinct itself. The chain of custody is intact. Naomi looked directly at Harlan. Objection overruled. She didn't miss the flicker in his eyes. A brief flash of panic before the mask snapped back into place. Then came the breaking point. Rojas called Officer Mills back to the stand. His confident swagger from earlier in the trial was gone. He looked like a man walking into a trap he could see but couldn't avoid. Officer Mills, Rojas began. You've testified under oath that the fingerprint evidence in this case was collected lawfully and without manipulation. Is that correct? Yes, Mills said, his voice tight. And yet, you had multiple conversations with Councilman Price, a man with no official role in this investigation in the days before the arrest. Can you explain that? They were. About community events, Mills muttered. Rojas raised an eyebrow. Community events? At 1 a.m, Naomi heard a couple of jurors snort quietly. Rojas stepped closer to the witness stand. Officer, are you aware that we have evidence linking your actions in this case to a cash payment routed from Councilman Price to District Attorney Harlan? The color drained from Mills' face. No, he said too quickly. Rojas took a deep breath, as if savoring the moment. Let me be clear. Either you admit that your testimony was false, or we move forward with perjury charges and let a jury decide. Mills glanced at Harlan, then at the jury, then at Naomi. His throat bobbed. I was told what to find, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs. Naomi's gavel slammed down. Order, order, but it was too late. The truth was out. Harlan stood slowly, his face a mask of rage. Your Honor, I move to strike that testimony from the record. Motion denied, Naomi said, her voice firm. The witness's statement stands. Mills slumped in the chair, staring at the floor. It wasn't supposed to get this far, he muttered. Price. He said it'd be clean. Just one more case. Said Harlan would cover it. Naomi's heart was pounding, but her face stayed neutral. She knew the jury was watching her as closely as they were watching the witness. Officer Mills, she said, you are reminded you are under oath. If you have more to add, now is the time. His hands trembled. It's not just Rivers. There are others. Files. Evidence lockers. All of it's been played with. Price calls the shots. Harlan makes it happen. The gallery erupted again. This time, Naomi didn't bother to bang the gavel right away. Let them feel it, she thought. Let them hear what corruption sounds like when it's cornered. By the time court recessed for the day, the atmosphere was electric. The jurors walked out with stunned expressions. The reporters swarmed the steps, and Naomi stayed behind in her chambers, staring at the rain-streaked window. Samuel Brooks appeared in her doorway, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You just cracked the dam, Naomi." "Cracking isn't the same as breaking," she said. "They'll fight like hell to patch it. Then you'd better be ready to hit harder tomorrow." That night, Naomi went home to a silent house. Marcus met her at the door, wrapping her in a hug she didn't know she needed. "They're talking about it on every station," he said. "You did it." She shook her head. "No, not yet. But tomorrow. Tomorrow we finish it." The morning after Mill's confession, the courthouse felt different. The usual steady hum of footsteps, murmured greetings, and the shuffle of case files was replaced by something sharper, a low, electric buzz. Naomi stepped through the metal detectors and immediately felt eyes on her. Officers, clerks, even lawyers from unrelated cases turned their heads as she passed. Some nodded in quiet respect. Others looked away. Her clerk, Denise, caught up to her at the elevator. "They're saying Mills has been placed on administrative leave without pay," she whispered. "Internal Affairs is already in his office." Naomi pressed the elevator button. "They should have been there months ago, they're also saying." Denise lowered her voice further. "Harlan's meeting with the mayor right now." Naomi stepped into the elevator, jaw tightening. That wasn't a surprise. When cornered, men like Harlan didn't resign. They rallied their allies. By the time Naomi took the bench, the gallery was overflowing. The case had made the morning headlines. Officer admits evidence tampering in high-profile trial. Councilman Price linked to alleged police corruption. Reporters filled every back row seat. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but Naomi could feel the weight of their coverage. Harlan looked different. His usual swagger was replaced by a brittle stillness, like glass stretched too thin. Price wasn't present, but Naomi could almost feel his shadow in the room. Court resumed with redirect questioning, but the prosecution's case was in free fall. Every attempt Harlan made to reframe the narrative, miscommunication, misinterpretation, procedural errors, only dug the hole deeper. The jurors' faces told the story. Crossed arms, narrowed eyes, a few shaking their heads outright. During the mid-morning recess, Naomi returned to her chambers and found Samuel Brooks waiting with a manila folder. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," he said, setting the folder on her desk. "What's in there?" "Bank transfers. Price's campaign fund to a shell company. That shell company funneled money to Mill's brother-in-law, a man with zero legitimate income, but suddenly holding assets in the six figures." Naomi scanned the documents. The pattern was unmistakable. "This ties it all together," she murmured. Samuel nodded. "It's enough for a federal case. If you want, I can walk it to the U.S. attorney today." She looked up. "Do it. And Samuel, make sure they know not to sit on it. Price will already be moving pieces off the board." Back in the courtroom, Naomi called the trial back to order. But before the defense could resume, a man in a navy suit entered quietly and slipped a folded note to Harlan. Harlan read it, his jaw working, then stood. "Your Honor, the prosecution moves for a recess until Monday. There are matters that require immediate attention." Naomi knew exactly what this was. A stalling tactic. Time to regroup, to lean on the mayor, to maybe even try to bury what had been revealed. "Motion denied," she said evenly. "We proceed." A ripple of surprise ran through the room. Harlan sat down slowly, his knuckles white around his pen. By late afternoon, it was clear where the jury was headed. The defense had dismantled the prosecution's timeline, exposed the questionable chain of custody, and hammered home Mill's own words. But Naomi knew this trial's ripples were already spreading beyond these walls. Her phone buzzed in her chambers between sessions. A text from Marcus. "Two men were parked outside the house again. Left when I came out." Naomi stared at the message, the weight of it settling over her. The fight might be playing out in court, but it was touching her home, her marriage, her safety. She typed back, "Stay inside. Call the neighbors if they come back." When the day finally adjourned, Naomi lingered at the bench as the courtroom emptied. She looked at Malik, who turned and gave her the smallest nod. not of gratitude, but of solidarity. They both knew the truth. Clearing his name wouldn't end the danger. It would only shift the battlefield. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and shining under the streetlights. Samuel was waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. "Files are in the U.S. Attorney's hands," he said. "They promised to move fast." "They'd better," Naomi replied, "because Price isn't going to wait around to be arrested." Samuel studied her face. "You know this isn't over, right? Even if Malik walks free, there's going to be blowback. You've embarrassed powerful people." Naomi's voice was calm, but her eyes were steady. "Then they'll have to learn to live with embarrassment." That night at home, Marcus was pacing in the kitchen. "I don't like this, Naomi." They're circling. First the zoning guys, then the cars outside. "It's intimidation. Plain and simple." She set her briefcase down. "I know, but if I back down now, we lose more than just this case. We lose the message that the law can stand up to people like them." He stopped pacing, met her eyes. "Just promise me one thing, you'll be careful." She gave a small, tired smile. "Careful's not going to cut it anymore. I need to be ready." The final day of testimony began under a bright, deceptively calm sky. From her bench, Naomi could see sunlight spilling through the courthouse windows, painting golden streaks across the jury box. It was almost enough to make you forget the storm swirling just beyond these walls. Almost. The defense rested its case at 10:07 a.m., having done more than enough to cast reasonable doubt. Mill's confession, the phone records, the forged signatures. Each piece had chipped away at the prosecution's story until it was nothing but splinters. Harlan stood for his closing argument, but his voice carried none of the confidence he had on day one. He stumbled through his statements, trying to convince the jury that all the inconsistencies were minor procedural errors, and that the central fact, Malik's fingerprint on the car, still proved guilt. The jurors' faces told a different story. No one was buying it. When the jury was dismissed to deliberate, Naomi felt a strange stillness settle over the room. After all the tension, the arguments, the revelations, there was nothing left to do but wait. She retreated to her chambers, where Samuel was waiting with an update. "They've frozen Price's accounts," he said without preamble. "Federal warrant went through last night. They're moving in on 2 of his associates this afternoon." Naomi let out a slow breath. "That's the first good news I've heard all week." "Don't get too comfortable," Samuel warned. "Price still has friends in high places. If they get to a judge who's willing to delay the warrants, we could lose the momentum." Naomi nodded. "Then we make sure they can't." The jury returned in just under 3 hours. Naomi watched as they filed in, the foreperson clutching the verdict form. Malik sat rigid at the defense table, his mother's hand gripping his arm. In the matter of the state versus Malik Rivers, the foreperson read, "On the charge of grand theft auto, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of possession of stolen property, not guilty. On the charge of resisting arrest, not guilty." The words landed like a thunderclap. Malik's shoulders sagged in relief. His mother covered her face with both hands, sobbing quietly. The gallery erupted into applause before Naomi's gavel brought order back. "You are free to go, Mr. Rivers," she said, her voice carrying both authority and warmth. "Court is adjourned." Outside, the courthouse steps were a swarm of reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones jutted forward. Malik stood at the top of the steps, his mother beside him, as Rojas gave a brief statement. "This verdict is a victory not just for my client," Rojas said, "but for every citizen who believes in holding power accountable. We thank the jury for their courage, and the court for ensuring a fair trial." Naomi didn't stay for the rest. She slipped out a side exit, Samuel falling into step beside her. "Word is Price's phone is already lighting up," he said. "He knows the walls are closing in." "Good," Naomi replied, "because this isn't just about winning a trial. It's about cleaning out every last corner of whatever network he's been running." That evening, Naomi hosted a small gathering at her home. Not a celebration, but a moment to breathe. Marcus grilled chicken on the back patio while Samuel and Denise sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the latest developments. Denise set down her glass of iced tea. "You know they're going to come for you harder now. You embarrassed them in open court and cost them a conviction they thought was guaranteed. Naomi nodded. That's why we need to keep the pressure on. Price's operation is bigger than just Mills and Harlan. We have to cut it off at the root. Marcus glanced through the patio door. And what if the root fights back? Naomi gave a small, tired smile. Then we don't give it a chance to grow back. The secondary threads began tying themselves off over the next 48 hours. Officer Mills was officially charged with perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. His badge was confiscated, and his arrest made the evening news. District Attorney Harlan was temporarily suspended pending an internal investigation, though Naomi suspected the temporary part was wishful thinking on his part. And Price was still free, but the pressure was mounting. The federal case was gaining traction, and Naomi knew it was only a matter of time before the indictment landed. On the third night after the verdict, Naomi received an unexpected call. Judge Carter? Yes. This is Alicia Bennett. My brother was convicted 2 years ago. Stolen car case. Arresting officer was Mills. I saw what happened in your courtroom this week, and I have something you should see. Naomi felt that old burn in her chest. Bring it to my chambers tomorrow morning. I can't, Alicia said quickly. It's not safe. I'll send someone I trust. The line went dead. Later, Naomi stood in her backyard, looking up at the night sky. The stars were faint behind a veil of clouds, the air warm and still. Marcus came up beside her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. You did good, he said softly. We did one good thing, she corrected. Now we see if it's enough to start something bigger. The courthouse was quiet now. No cameras on the steps, no reporters lurking in the hallways. The crowd had moved on, chasing the next headline. But Naomi Carter knew the fight wasn't over. Not for Malik, not for the city, and certainly not for her. She sat alone in her chambers late one evening, the warm glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows across the wood-paneled walls. On her desk lay 2 folders, one with Malik Rivers' closed case file, the other with a growing stack of documents from Samuel Brooks, the federal investigation into Price and his network. Her fingers hovered over the first folder before opening the second. The truth was,